and Grim again. Uh, get to my right piece of paper here. So, materials selection. There's a lot of ways to go about this. I have my own particular way. Um, and this is going to sound funny, but it's weeding. I start with weeding. I know that sounds weird, but once again, when I took over so many years ago, not talking ill of the person that was before me, you've heard the expression, you can't see the forest for the trees. We couldn't see the library for the books. There were books crammed everywhere. It was hard for the kids to find anything. They had put additional shelving, excuse me, like all the way up to the ceiling. There was nothing tall enough for the kids to stand on to get to them. That they weren't curriculum specific. We had um, one entire shelving system of recipe books. Great. None of them were recipe books for kids. They were like adult recipe books. And we didn't have a home ec class and hadn't ever had a home ec class at those grade levels. So it was the process of picking new things needed to start with getting rid of old things. And I happen to be the librarian lady who loves to weed old books. I want to make room for what kids want. So first I had to determine what we didn't want, what we did want, and now in my current circumstances, what I have room for, because my space is so much smaller. I got rid of a lot of our nonfiction. I now have a section that I just call popular nonfiction. And those are things, if the kids have particular requests, that I keep there. But we had so many nonfiction books that had been utilized in the curriculum years before, and changes were made, and we still had all these books and nobody wanted them. So what I did was I asked, and I started with the staff. Currently, because I have my system in place, I start with students. But at that time, I started with the staff. And I went to the staff and I said, what can I curate in the library to help your subject, to help your curriculum, to help your standards? And then I would go through and I would pull a list. I would create a list through Destiny. And I would say, okay, I have these books. They haven't been checked out in these many years. Are these curriculum specific for you anymore? Do you need them? Is there something that you could need? And the staff was very helpful with that. I actually worked closely with PE because of health and got them resources. Um, that was a good place to start because it allowed me to weed extensively, um, so that it was more appealing to the kids. Because once again, our end goal is for kids to read. But how can they do that if there's just so much there and it's nothing that they want, or it's nothing about what they're interested in? And that does change. The interests of kids, first it was years ago, it was the big Twilight craze. And from Twilight, then it kind of went into werewolves and angels and fairies, and it kind of cycles through. Sometimes fantasy is big, sometimes it's action. And then I've had groups that really do enjoy nonfiction. And so I find books for them. Um, so after determining what the staff needs and wants were and were not, then I went to the students, and that's still my go-to. So I ask them, especially when seventh grade comes in, because I don't know them as well. So when seventh grade comes in, I'll say, hey, what do you guys like to read? And then sometimes I'll start with, okay, how many of you don't like to read? Go ahead and raise your hand. And then I do the big, oh, do you hear that? That's the sound of my heart breaking. But I recognize that some kids don't like to read. So I will then say, what movies do you like? What TV shows do you like? What video games do you like? Because I can help you find a book. That's kind of my job. I can help you find a book based around that. And so I keep a running, I honestly do it on Amazon mostly. I have a wish list. So I have a book wish list, and the kids know they can give me books to place on that wish list and they will get purchased. Um, when I do book talks, and actually I'll pull a little book over here. I don't know if you guys can see this. I haven't purchased this yet because my funds haven't been released, but it's Meddling Kids. I have a kid who is all into horror. And so sometimes I just Google young adult horror. And our public library got it for me. So I'll bring those books in and let the kids look at them. Our public library is great about letting us borrow their books and bring it in to see if their books our kids want here. I let them shop when I do book talks. I have a Prometheum board. And so we will actually go online and Google lists. Sometimes we go to Amazon and we go to their recommended lists. That's the link that I will share out. That for some reason it's not letting me share this Word document. Is just a bunch of helpful links where we go to read about books, to get recommendations from books. Guys, really, reviews on Amazon do me pretty well. People are pretty honest in their reviews. I don't know about everybody else, but our budget was diminished just over a decade ago by a sizable amount of money. And I do have money available, but not what I had before. So I really do have to make my dollars count. I don't do magazine subscriptions anymore. When they got away from that with the curriculum, I just couldn't justify spending the money. But what I do is everyone here can be signed up for a public library card, including our staff. Whether they live in district or not, our local library allows them to get it's like a school worker card so that everyone can utilize it. And with Hoopla, and then Libby and different things, we can go through our public library and get magazines online. I do an online subscription to Comics Plus. We have a lot of kids that want to read graphic novels. And graphic novels, one, are pricey, and two, they're just not always the best made. They're not always well made. I seem to do a lot of repairs on them. So doing them digitally, we are a 1-to-1 district. So each student has a Chromebook at this grade level. The younger grade levels have iPads, and then I think the Chromebooks start in about 3rd grade. But they can access it through our district site and go to Comics Plus. And if there's one that they really like there and they ask me to get a copy of it, I get a copy of it and I add it to our collection. Book trailers, you can go to YouTube and they will have book trailers, and some of them are like long and go on, you can loop it. And I mean, some of them will have multiples put together. So one thing that I do is I'll set up like a little Chromebook or laptop, whatever you have, and I put it on YouTube and I just have book trailers playing right inside the library door. So if the kids see that, and they say, oh, that one looks interesting, Mrs. Grimm, I add it. I don't do book fairs anymore. I found that they just didn't carry a lot of content for this grade level, but the other side of the school, the younger grades, does a book fair, and we help them. And I let my kids shop at the book fair. They can go down and pick books that they want to see in our library, and I make sure to purchase those. Our 8th grade language arts teacher uses Book Talk, which is on TikTok, to keep track of a lot of things and to help decide how we want to select the materials for our library. And the kids can't access that here at school, obviously, but they can access it outside of school. And we always tell them, email us your recommendation. You don't have to see me in person. You don't have to be in the library. If you're at home and you're reading something and you find another book that looks interesting, you can access Destiny from home to see if we have it. And if we don't, email it to us. I will add it to the list. The other big thing on material selection that was impressed upon me when I started back when we still had a district librarian is read. You need to read the books to be able to decide what you want and what you don't want. we have had some, we're all called library assistants, by the way. We're all paras. We don't have a district librarian anymore. I do the paperwork that role did in the past. But we had library assistants that didn't like to read. And they were lovely people. I really enjoyed some of them. I'm friends with them to this day. But it always boggled. I'm like, how do you choose books if you don't read, if you don't know what the kids like? And I order books I don't necessarily like. I'm not a huge fan of verse novels, but we had a group that loved verse novels. So I order verse novels. I also, when I genrefied, added a shelf of verse novels, and I always joke and tell the kids that I keep them there so I know where they're at and I can stay away from them. Though that being said, there are some verse novels that I have enjoyed recently, and I'm getting ready to do a book club on one next month. So things can change. So there are different ways. Yes, I love to discuss the books that I've read with students. And I'll tell the student, what part, I'll ask them, what part are you in on a book? And they'll tell me, and I'll say, okay, if you read any further, come see me in the morning. We're going to need to talk about this. That goes back to the last session on building relationships. But it helps. And the kids do know that they can come to me and say, Mrs. Grimm, I'm looking for this book. And part of the material selection, they talked about it in the keynote this morning, is addressing all of the censorship issues. I know some people are scared. Best first novelist, Starfish. Okay, I know I keep getting distracted by the chats, guys. I'm sorry. I totally agree. And we are doing her second book, which is And Then Boom. That's the one that we're doing it. Yes, highly recommend. That's what we're doing our first book club on. Love it. So back to the material selection. I am very lucky that years ago we came up with a challenge policy, a materials policy. We adopted the ALA standards. That was already all done, so that part's not such a big deal here. And what I do is, if anything, I'm going to pull one off just so you can see it. If anything is questionable on a book, my camera's not focusing very well. I put a YA sticker and I just put it on the bottom front corner of the book. So when I do my Library 101 at the beginning of the year, I let the kids know, hey, this is just like when you go to a movie and it's a PG-13 or a PG or a rated R. This is just a system. I am not telling you what to read. I am not telling you that I find the content questionable. I am telling you that some people will, and I will give them examples, and I will say, this book might be because of questionable language. This book might be because of racial slurs that were historically accurate. This book might be because of violence. This book, might be because of an emotional issue or an abusive situation. And I'll say, that does not mean go find all the YA books in the library and read them looking for cuss words. We did that in the dictionary when I was in school. My kids don't even really know how to use a dictionary now. But I address it with them early on and I make it no big deal. And I let them know I'm not going to judge them. And I get some weird requests. I had one student come to me and say, Mrs. Grimm, could you find me a book with an LGBTQ relationship, but maybe where there's 3 people and it's a mystery? Guys, I was like, I will see what I can do. I asked for some recommendations. I gave her some recommendations, but I let the kids know I am a no judgment zone. I have had parents that have told me, I don't want my kids to read Harry Potter. Our church believes that promotes witchcraft. Okay. That's their decision. I'm still going to offer Harry Potter. I'm still going to have Harry Potter stuff all over my library, and letting the kids know, kind of like with the language issue when I talked about the behavior management, the same thing goes for books and movies. Some parents allow kids to watch more mature content and some don't. That's a personal decision That's them and their parents. It's not my place to decide what they can and cannot read. Now, am I going to carry 50 Shades of Grey in the library? No, no, I am not. They can get that from the public library because I'm not carrying it here. Though I do, when someone requests it, like to tell them that that did originally start as a Twilight fan fiction, just because I like to blow their minds every once in a while. But I have found more and more when I am looking at materials, I do look at it from the aspect of, is this something that will be challenged? And it doesn't mean that I don't buy it. It means that I know I'm probably going to put a YA sticker on the front of it because, once again, all of my books are YA books. So putting that sticker on the front, just like I said, serves as a, hey, this is just like a movie rating. And I explain it that way, and that it's not a big deal. And I've been very lucky that it's never been a big deal. And I've done that for 10 years now. And I haven't had a challenge since that time. The challenges actually happened before I implemented that policy. I do have it stated on my library page on the district website. When we used to have a parent open house and we had a little meeting, and I would just say it then. And because I'm so matter of fact about it, I guess it just doesn't turn into a big deal. I probably should knock on some serious wood, because it is something that we all have to think about when we're doing materials. I agree it's hard to maintain a collection that meets all the ages. That's why I'm glad that when we moved down here, I still kept 7th and 8th grade. I'm iffy about doing 6th grade. I wanted to try to pull them in next year, and I still just don't know because of the content of some of the books and being age appropriate. Though I'm not worried about the ZPD ranges. That part doesn't bother me as much. But some of the content, we all know it's a hard road to walk with this because people are afraid of losing their jobs. I'm lucky that our district addressed all of this. Like I said, I think we adopted those policies back in fall of 2007 was when our district, she's no longer here, but our kind of most current district librarian, when she started. We got all of that done. So we've had that protection. We've actually used those policies more with things being challenged in the classroom than in the library. YA, so the YA label, it just stands for young adult. Like I said, I know my camera's not doing a very good job. I get these from Demco. I don't know if I can make it see it if I do it closer. I think it's not gonna be real clear because I'm here in the background. So it's young adult. Obviously, all of my books are young adult. So that was just my way of saying, hey, questionable content. And it doesn't mean I find it questionable. It means that some families will find it questionable. Or if you're not comfortable. I have kids that don't like sad books. I don't like sad books. So sometimes it's an abusive situation, and that can not be good with some of our kids. So I always tell them, if you have a question, bring the book to me and I will help you. I will tell you maybe what the content is there that someone might find questionable, and then you can make an informed decision about whether or not you want to read it. I also tell the kids, if you start a book and don't like it, quit reading it. The running joke here is books I don't like go in the freezer. It's a thing. If a book upsets me, I put it in the freezer. And the kids find it hysterical. And my high school kids will still come back and say, Mrs. Grimm, have you put any books in the freezer lately? Inevitably, they want to read the books that upset me that I don't want to read. They think that's great. I don't know. But once again, that comes to that honesty, being honest with the kids. No, guys, I don't like it. They know I have a shelf of verse novels just because I didn't like verse novels until Starfish. I loved it. And I'm honest with the kids about that. I didn't used to be a very big science fiction fan. I like science fiction movies, not so much the books. And I'm going to go back. Sometimes wish there was another rating level between middle grade and YA. I'm in a 4-8 building. It's hard to find stuff more 6th, 8th grade compared to 9th grade and up that is YA, but not too mature, and avoiding the soft censorship like mentioned before. Exactly. I mean, it is tough. And we have to be realistic that when we choose materials, that is the line that we are walking. Um, we had my 8th grade language arts used to do a big project with the song Titanium, and she would tie it in with a book, and they would do a writing lesson, and they would do an activity. And we had a parent that lost their mind and said that she was promoting hatred against law enforcement. That was so not the intent. It was about self-empowerment. Um, and it turned into a thing. It turned into a thing, which it was a classroom thing, not a library thing, but it was still a thing. And so I think we are all hyper aware. None of us wants to be the next person on the news. Um, I just want kids to read. And if that's a graphic novel, guess what? I buy graphic novels. Not all the staff agrees with it. Not all. I just want them to read. If they want to reread the book, great. I support our curriculum in that in the 7th and 8th grade, our kids are required as part of their language arts class to read 2 books, AR books, in their ZPD range of at least 100 pages each quarter. I make purchases with that in mind. I try to find things that are in a good ZPD level that fit a lot of kids. I try to keep some of them shorter. Excuse me, guys, I'm telling you, allergy season. Like I said, I try to keep those around 100 pages, and I will even pull them and keep them on a separate cart. And I tell the kids, this is what you are required to do for class, and I will support you in that. Other than that, I just want you to read. Doesn't matter if it's in your ZPD range. You can read a book outside your ZPD range. You just can't take a test on it. You want to reread a book? I don't know about you guys. I reread books. I have favorite books that I reread. Sometimes I want the comfort of it. So I keep that in mind when I'm doing material selection. I need to keep fresh books in that help them meet their reading requirement because I want to support the classroom teacher, but I also just want kids to read. So I try to do the decisions that I make when choosing materials to reflect that. They need to be for the staff, but they also need to be for the students. They're only going to read what they want to read. And by making them a part of the process, like I said, during one of the lessons, usually mid-year, when the reading class comes in, we just pull up the Promethean board and we pick out books. And sometimes it is very easy to go to Amazon because they can just click add to wish list, and they think it's great. I've given them a voice. It helps build on that relationship that carries over into the management, the behavior management in the library. I want them to know this is their library. I am ultimately in charge, but it is their library and it needs to reflect them. And that will change year from year. Like I said, some years I have kids that all they want are nonfiction books. Some years they don't want to touch nonfiction. They want fantasy. Sometimes it's action. By involving them in the process, it helps me choose how to spend my limited funds to make the best decision possible. I'm going to check the chat because I know we're getting close to being done. Did anybody have any final questions? And guys, please remember, there's no magic bullet for everyone. Everybody's circumstance is different. Give yourself grace. Ask someone else for help in your building. Say, hey, I have this idea or this problem. Could you help me? But give yourself grace. Once again, the kids are going to make mistakes and we are too. As long as we learn from them, that's what matters in the end. So if you find that, hey, these books aren't being checked out, then maybe buy more of a different genre the next time. Be adaptable in that. It kind of ebbs and it flows, if that makes sense. I think we've hit just about everything. If no one had any final questions, it says we've got 2 minutes left. Do I typically buy multiple copies or singular to stretch the budget? I only buy multiple copies in really super popular books, usually if it's part of a series and the kids are waiting on it. but I will borrow from our local library. And seriously, my local library lets us just borrow their books and bring them down here for the kids to try them out. It helps their circulation statistics. I am sharing my email out with everyone. And I will make sure to enable everyone's share requests for the previous presentation. So yes, I sometimes buy multiple copies, but not as many as I used to. But our K through 6 library, they buy lots of multiple copies, but their budget is also more than mine. They get a larger percentage because I'm just 2 grades and they're technically 7. Any other questions? We have about 1 minute left. Thank you for putting up with my coughing and my stuffy nose. What do you use to decide what book gets the YA stickers? Like I said, basically, if I see cussing in it, some extreme physical situations, I put one on there. And sometimes the kids will come to me and say, Mrs. Grimm, I found this part a little upsetting. Could you put a YA sticker on it? And I do, because it's not keeping the book from anyone. It's just to be used as a guide. Okay, I need the link and permission. Use tidal wave. Yes, tidal wave is good for that. I agree. And then, like I said, just reading online reviews. Can you repost the link to the first presentation? Yes, let me see. There's the link for the first presentation. And I think they are going to share all of these links and stuff out again later. And I'll make sure, maybe if I PDF my other thing that just has the helpful links on there, I'd be able to share it. It's the one that I shared last year, and it was so helpful, I thought I'd share it this year. So I think our time is up. Thank you, everyone, for listening to me blather on. I hope everyone learns great things today, and that miraculously tomorrow everybody gets a full, like 35 hours a week in their library and unlimited funds to buy things.